Hello everyone, I'm Neil Apt and I want to welcome you to LiveOnWeb. Our focus today is health and wellness. We'll dive into it from a number of different angles, including taking a closer look at sleep apnea in a few moments, with Transport Topics reporter Eric Miller and Christine Heidock of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. There has been a growing spotlight on truck driver health and really the overall wellness of the entire industry for a number of years. Fueled by the combination of regulations and the growing number of studies spotlighting that truckers are more likely to be overweight and generally less healthy than others, the issue appears to have reached a tipping point. We encourage you to interact with us today. You can send in your questions by emailing share@ttnews.com or by entering them into this article page. We will answer the best ones later in the program. So, just how critical is the health and wellness issue? According to ATRI's latest survey of industry concerns released late last year, health and wellness came in number 7 overall. That was the highest it ever ranked in the annual survey, and 5% of respondents listed it as the top issue facing the industry. I now want to bring in Ralph Garcia, a career driver and member of America's Road Team who works for ABF Freight out of New Mexico, and Sapiwe Baleka, a world-class swimmer turned truck driver and fitness trainer. Thank you both for joining us today.
It's good to be here.
Thank you.
Ralph, I want to begin with you. Your driving career has spanned 37 years, 3.5 accident-free miles. First, congratulations on those amazing accomplishments. I guess my first question is if you believe the importance of health and wellness is more on the minds of the truck driving population than ever before.
Yes, I would say that it's very important. People are really keeping track of what they're doing and trying to get a little more exercise.
So is there any way that you can sort of compare the atmosphere, the environment, the discussion today, in today's truck stops, in today's interactions at your terminals, with what it might have been when you started 37 years ago?
When I started back 37 years ago, it wasn't as strict as far as the health. There was a lot of guys that took care of themselves, and I was one of them. And there wasn't places you can go to eat where they told you exactly how many calories or what types of things to eat. And I think the general knowledge wasn't out there for drivers, and a lot of guys didn't know how to eat. So through the years, it's developed, and people have been keeping track of it through the years.
Okay, now with that said, how there have been advancements, let's bring in Sapiwe. Now, you started driving less than a decade ago, and a little later in the program, we're going to dive into both of these personal stories. Really interesting from both perspectives. But with that said, you started less than a decade ago now, and you had a pretty eye-opening experience your first couple months on the road as a truck driver. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, when I got into trucking, I didn't know anything about truck driving. Never been in a truck. Went through the student driver training program at Prime, which is based out in Springfield, Missouri. And in the first 2 months of my driving career, I gained 10.7% of my body weight. For most of my life, I was an athlete. I was fit. And I just had that moment where I realized if I didn't take care of myself on the road, if I wasn't responsible for my weight and my well-being, that I was going to end up overweight or obese and become one of these statistics.
Now, you almost made the Olympics again. We're going to talk about this a little later. And as a swimmer, so did you ever imagine you got behind a truck? Clearly some different challenges, but did you have any idea what you might be in for in those first couple months on the road before you began to adjust your lifestyle?
No, and I think like a lot of new drivers that come into the industry, you don't know. And until recently, if you went to a company, they wouldn't actually tell you what was going to happen. I mean, we know there's a problem. We know there's a lot of overweight and obese drivers, but nobody would explain to you exactly, how your sleep schedule is going to change and your hormones are going to change and the effect that this is going to have on you, and more importantly, what you can do about it to mitigate those effects. So, I didn't know. I had never thought about it. I was just looking at, okay, what can I do now? I want to get into trucking. I need to learn how to drive the truck safe. I need to learn how to do the business. And the last thing on my mind was health. And, just...
A lot of the people that contacted us leading up to today's program, a whole bunch of different issues that they talked about. So some of what they want to know seem to be a fairly low level. How do we get started? What are some of the basics? So why don't we start there? let's talk first about exercise, which I guess might be the natural one. I need to improve my health. Well, I need to exercise more. So, for both of you, what are either some of the initial steps someone could take, either becoming a driver, their lifestyle is changing, what do I need to do? Or maybe it's someone who has been out there and, sort of have gotten a little bit behind and maybe, been a little lazier and I need to do something and I'm not in that shape I was when I was 18, 21, but what can I do now? So with that said, how do we get started? What are some of the basics that we can share?
I think a lot of times the time span that you have a chance to get out of that truck and exercise is you just want to take advantage as much as possible to keep moving. A lot of times, just the other day I dropped a trailer and I had a little time to wait for my load. So I just went walking around the parking lot, just something simple like that. You have to be practical in the time that you have. So you're not able to get to the gym often, so you just try to do what you can. But the main thing is moving. We started this Fitbit program with Healthy Fleet, and this has been really a motivator to start walking and taking more steps and getting a little bit more exercise. And then when you're at the house, you have time to go to the gym. And a lot of times, as far as the food part, most of the time I take my own meals, and if you can't do that, some of the truck stops, they'll have a menu there and they'll tell you exactly how many calories and some of the good food to eat, especially the petrol. Petrol is really good for that.
We're going to get back to food. That's coming up next.
Yeah,
you jumped ahead on me. Let me ask you about exercise. You talked about Fitbit and some of the technology and about walking. I know we talked a little bit last night, and some people out there may be familiar with you. You have a perspective on exercise, about the walking, certainly part of it, but why don't you share a little bit about where you're coming from?
Well, Neil, we talked about the science, and maybe we'll get into some of that later, but to be very short and very clear, if a driver is at that point where they say, I need to do something, the most effective thing they can do is every time they open the door to get ready to get in their truck to start driving, if they would move any movement they can do at maximum intensity for 4 minutes. When you do that, you literally turn your metabolism on to its highest level. Now for the next several hours, you're burning fat at an accelerated rate while you're behind the driving wheel. So the first thing is just get into your mind. You want to turn your metabolism on before you start your driving shift, and it only takes 4 minutes to do it.
And that's not 4 minutes in a gym, that's just 4 minutes period.
Right on the side of your truck.
Okay. Well, let's talk about food, which I think sometimes can be a little bit harder to navigate. Maybe it's less understood, and while, as you said, there are a lot better options than maybe there used to be. I still think, and we've gotten some comments, it can still be a little complicated. So you talked a little bit about packing snacks. Maybe you could share a little bit about that. But when you're also out there and at the truck stops, I know you did a lot of long-haul driving too. If you could share about how you navigate a truck stop and as you learn along the way.
Well, what I do is I usually try to keep my food intake, I usually at 60% protein, 40% carbohydrates, and 10% fat. That's me.
For you.
For me. And that's what works for me. Anytime, I try to stay away from anything in a bag.
Right.
I always say God's food. I always eat what's natural, fresh fruit, barbecue chicken, and also vegetables for carbohydrates and green, fresh vegetables. And I always drink water. I stay away from Cokes, anything with salt, a lot of salt. So those are just the basic things that I do every week. And as far as the truck stops, they have the menu, like I said, they'll have a heart rate, a heart on each side of the menu, and it tells you exactly what you can eat. So if you have to go to the truck stop, you try to get the healthy menu. Besides, if anything else, it usually has grease or it has fat or anything like that. So that's what I do personally.
Food tips?
Food tips. Well, the thing that I tell drivers when they come in to start my 13-week program is that until we establish your nutrition profile, you don't know what to change. So the first thing we do is we'll use a smartphone app, and there's plenty of them out there, they're free, and we'll have clients log their food, everything they eat and drink for 7 days. And I would recommend every driver, start with that. You don't even have to make any changes to your food, but log your food so that we can analyze it and see how frequently are you eating, okay? What is your carbohydrate consumption? Because that's the key to losing weight, is limiting and monitoring that. And before we tell you what to change to, let's find out what is it that you're eating that's doing the most damage and fix that first.
Is portion size, where does that fit in?
Yeah. Portion size for me is important because anytime, you can have healthy food, but if you eat too much, you're going to pack on the weight because you're sitting in that cab and not burning any calories. So the portion size, for me, I count calories, but that's important to me. And every individual has to find what works for him. Just like he was saying, they analyze exactly what they intake, and like you said, you can tell exactly what's giving you the weight. For me, it's carbohydrates. I got to stay away from white breads, anything that's got a lot of carbs. It'll just stay on me because you can feel it. You get out of the truck and you can feel your belts a little bit tighter.
As we were preparing for today, I'm not going to hold this up, but it's an article we found online breaking down using just the FDA guidelines what might be considered healthy and unhealthy. And some of this, it's amazing, and it goes to this confusion. I see here Fruit Loops, technically based on fat and cholesterol sodium, could be listed as healthy, but something like avocado and salad, almonds, salmon, listed as unhealthy, and I do think that there's a lot of confusion out there. Right. So maybe it is more than just a calorie count that people do need to figure out what does work for them or not. And there's some tools out there. You get in tune with your body over time and your routine.
And like you said, there's plenty of apps out there that you can look at, and for what I've seen in the industry, it's the driver, and like you said, you got to analyze every person, what affects them differently. There might be different issues that they gain weight. Sugar is another thing that a lot of the foods that say they're a diet or whatever, they have a lot of sugar, and they kind of hide.
It can be tricky.
Right, they can be tricky. So the rule of thumb for me is stay away from anything that's in a bag. That you don't know some of the ingredients, some of the food preservatives, you can't burn that off. It goes straight to your kidneys. Like I said, water. Water flushes you out, keeps you clean, but it's always about clean foods, and clean diet.
You've talked a little on some of the YouTubes I've seen, not only water, but lemon in water. You have a lot of science behind it. We'll get back into that in a few minutes. So I think some additional tips will come out for people that continue to watch here. Just want to pause for a second, remind everyone they can send in questions to share and comments to share@ttnews.com. You can input them right into this article page throughout the hour. We're going to be getting to them. May also do some additional content afterwards to address some of them. Last week, I spoke with Paul Will. He's the chairman and CEO of Celadon Group. The Indianapolis-based company is one of the most recognized trucking fleets for their health and wellness efforts. Celadon was founded by Stephen Russell, who passed away in April. About a decade ago, he made the decision to invest in employee health through a series of measures, including opening a medical facility at the company's headquarters. Let's take a look at what Paul had to say about the benefits of these investments.
Yeah, so if you go back to when we first started looking at what can we do as far as from a driver standpoint, expediting the process. They come in, they have DOT physicals. What we'd have to do is we'd have to send them down the street to have the physical done. They'd have to come back and go through the rest of the orientation process. So it wasn't efficient. It wasn't really effective in the process. So it was kind of in that whole theme of, how do we, get the driver in, get the driver out, and then that leads to better retention down the road from the standpoint of you sometimes lose drivers through the recruiting, orientation, and then deployment process. So when we looked at it, first we originally started in a couple of what we had dorm rooms. We had individuals, doctors that would come in, do the physicals, nurse practitioners, etc. And then we've expanded that over the years to have a separate standalone building that actually does, the physicals, the drug testing, and then we've further expanded that individual standalone building to be able to do stuff for not only the drivers but the administrative staff and beyond just the DOT requirements. But if a driver's over the road, he's got a 53-foot trailer, dragging behind him. If he tries to go home, he has to take 2 days off. We have to route him home. It's inefficient. He may get home. He may miss his appointment based on where the loads are. And then he's in a situation where he's frustrated. He doesn't meet his appointment, and then he's got to do it again. So what we thought was if they come through Indianapolis, they could park their truck, park their trailer, come in, do what they need to do at the office. But we're also providing them the opportunity to meet with the doctor and have more of a physician, as a general practitioner type relationship, and then they feel comfortable, and then they will end up doing more for their own health and wellness than they otherwise would. Because no different than a lot of other employees, most people don't end up going to their doctor's appointments on a regular basis and all that. This just affords them the opportunity to actually have a relationship with a doctor and address needs and concerns prior to them becoming issues. So when you look at the whole population of the driving force, with what we started doing years ago was through when we opened the clinic, was we started doing health risk assessments, looking at your blood pressure, your cholesterol, you know, all those type of metrics, and try to start to get in front of both the drivers and administrative employees to help them better manage their own health, so that they could be a better, more productive driver and have a better, you know, personal life as well as a work life.
So how are you able to get drivers both initially engaged into this as these plans sort of have started and rolled out and advanced? Because also, how have you been able over the years to keep them engaged, to continuing to improve maybe other areas of their health as the plans have developed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's like I was saying, it's really challenging just in general, but especially with this population of drivers that are out 2 or 3 weeks at a time over the road. So it's really engaging them right from the get-go, right through the orientation process, having them meet with the individuals within the clinic, the doctors, the nurse practitioners, and then communicating to those drivers as they come through orientation, here's what we have to offer. We further started driving school down the street within our same industrial complex that has both exercise equipment. It's got exercise classes, spinning. It's got some light weights. It's got a clinic down there as well. So especially the students, when they come through the same thing, that they have an opportunity to really get engaged in the whole health process right from the get-go. So in addition to getting engaged right from the get-go, doing the health risk assessment, really evaluating how we can better help them help themselves, we stay in front of them. So many times you walk around a truck that's a mile. When you go to what can you do over the road to help yourself be better from a health standpoint. If you have high blood sugar, what can you do? So we put refrigerators in all the trucks that we currently supply to drivers. We have inverters in there so that they could actually use microwaves. They could actually have the power of the refrigerator, so there's no chance that it'll not be powered and therefore food will spoil. So they could actually get fruits and vegetables and some of the things that otherwise that they wouldn't necessarily get at truck stops. So they could eat healthier. So it's really just continuing to condition them to do the right things. Put them in a position where they've got the tools and the capability of having doctors, having the right amenities within the cab of the truck, having the right opportunities to exercise and be coached by individuals within the organization when they're through the terminals. We've got dietitians on site, on staff that can actually help them and coach them as well. So it's not just one thing. It's just a whole litany of things that we've got that we've done throughout over the years that we've grown. That allows us to stay in front of the driver and hopefully help them be more health conscientious.
Okay, we're back. I want to thank Paul Will for taking the time to speak with us. His entire interview, where he touches on a lot of different medical issues, also on Stephen Russell's life, will be available as part of the YouTube replays we'll be putting up later on. I covered Stephen Russell in 2011 at a ATA conference where he talked about medical plans he had implemented. We've gotten a lot of questions about wellness programs, about how do you measure return on investment. He said at the time, one of the things, again, this is 2011, so this does go back a while. A lot in terms of healthcare has changed since that time. He had said in 2011, the average medical cost per employee was $431, up only $2 from 2006. So it limited the increases. His health costs have gone up 7% annually. They were limiting the increase. He also shared some statistics about how the large percentage down on blood pressure. Those who had never exercised beginning to exercise and more coming into their ideal weight and just less hospital. A lot of statistics that were hard to quantify exact dollars. In the interview portion not shown with Paul, he talks about a bit of soft returns on investment. One that he particularly discussed was drivers coming to him saying, I want to go to the doctor, my family does, we can't do it based on my route. That's something you said you have experienced, yeah. And one of those soft returns, increase on productivity you were good. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, the big thing is when the last physical I had to take, I had to take time off, so it cost me a trip on my run. So, it's really hard to balance the time span and making an appointment. And sometimes the doctor has something going on, he can't make the appointment. So it's really difficult in that area. And you have to do it. And I had a time period of 20 days after I was notified. Mm-hmm. So you had to find a outlet that you.
So ABF has helped to create a system to get you there.
Right, they're very good about it, and they timed it just right where I could work into my schedule. But it's very difficult, especially the guys who are out there, all the time for 3 weeks at a time.
Now, you were a driver a few years for Brime. You worked with Robert Lowe to sort of get a health and wellness program pretty much from the ground up, from what I understand. So why don't you walk us through that process in terms of what you learned as a driver and then how you began to implement that through Prime and beyond?
Well, the great thing about it was Robert and Prime, they were ready for an innovative driver health and fitness program. Robert had already made a commitment to do whatever he could to improve the quality and longevity of life of drivers. In 2010, he had learned of this statistic that the average lifespan of a truck driver is around 61 to 64 years of age. And he wanted to do something about that. So there's this premature death epidemic in the industry. When I was out on the road, and I had a moment where I realized there's a nutrition and fitness program for everyone in America, except one that was specifically designed for long-haul truck drivers in their unique environment. Because, let's face it, you're living in a box, you don't have access to a kitchen, you have food storage issues, you're not able to get to the local organic farmers market, you don't go off the trucker's grid, so getting to the gym is impractical. And so I realized that what was needed was a program that fits into the environment and routine of a truck driver, not a third-party cookie-cutter program that takes a driver out of his routine. So I spent the next 4 years of my driving career designing such a system. And it was all based off of what I was able to, on the road, in the field, figure out what's the 2% things that you can do that will give you the 80% of the weight loss results that you want to achieve? Because the issue is time. And that's the key. It had to be maximally convenient, and it's worked.
Now, you didn't come into trucking thinking that you were going to create a fitness program, but it sort of found you, and you've discovered a few things, whether it be return on investment, whether it be some of the secrets to try and get some of these breakthroughs that sort of happened through your background and then through your own real life experience of struggling out there on the road and understanding how difficult it can be.
Exactly. It wasn't what I set out to do, but once I was in the environment, I realized I had to come up with a solution. What's the most effective, least time consuming way to get results? After I had built the system, I went to Robert and said, hey, look, I want to show you this system. I can manipulate and monitor the metabolism of your drivers, virtually, remotely. And when we talked in the conversation, to Robert's credit, it wasn't about the ROI. It wasn't about the return on investment. For him, it was, this is the right thing to do. I care about my drivers. And that made all the difference in the world.
So we're going to come back to that momentarily. Thank you both very much. I hope everyone out there is enjoying it. And again, please send in questions, comments you share at ttnews.com. We'll be getting to them shortly. I want to shift gears. I want to move on to sleep apnea. Momentarily, as I had said, we'll be joined by TT reporter Eric Miller and Christine Hydock of FMCSA about some of the steps going on in this area. First, I want to share part of a conversation I had last week with Dr. Todd Simo. He's Chief Medical Officer at HireRight. I started very simply by asking him, what is sleep apnea?
Well, yes, certainly. Sleep apnea is an obstruction of the upper airway when people are sleeping. There's different body habituses and that cause this particular problem. But as the upper airway is constricted during sleep, it actually causes fragmentation of the sleep cycle and causes multiple arousals through the night. And those multiple arousals through the night actually lead, to fatigue. And it also leads to other, profound medical problems such as heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure.
Now, we've seen a number of studies suggesting that possibly as many as 1/3 of truckers, give or take, may suffer sleep apnea in one form or another. Is that accurate in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's very accurate. FMCSA's own data show that 28% of the commercial driving population has sleep apnea. But there's also other studies out there that look at a variety of different risks and predictive factors that actually show that up to 50% of the commercial drivers are at risk. When we're reviewing exams, that the number is probably closer to the FMCSA number, but it is still a significant minority. So 28% to 30% is actually a really good number.
But you mentioned, you used the word risk. And if you could share with us a little bit about the risks surrounding sleep apnea that drivers and fleets need to know about.
Well, yeah, certainly. When you look at risk and when you start looking at risk for sleep apnea, age is certainly a factor. So the older we get, the more risk for sleep apnea we get. Also, the older we get and the fatter we get, the more risk of sleep apnea. So body habitus has a lot to play with it. As we get older, more sedentary, and we gain weight, it's actually that extra weight that then increases our risk of having upper airway dysfunction when we're sleeping that then actually causes the sleep apnea.
Now, FMCSA seems to be considering regulating the testing of sleep apnea. Is that something you think would be a wise idea for the agency to do?
Yeah, I believe it's really wise. I know FMCSA, with the rollout of the Certified Medical Examiner program, was trying to propagate guidance in regards to telling the examiners when to compel a driver to get a sleep study. That was shut down by Congress by saying that they were making de facto regulation without going through the official rulemaking process. But I believe it will be really advantageous for the industry and all to, not only the companies, the examiners, but also the drivers. They have a uniform standard which basically looks at risk and then defines who needs a sleep study. That'll level the playing field, and then you won't have various examiners using a variety of different guidances to compel who gets a study and who doesn't.
Let's talk a little bit about the diagnosis and testing process. What goes into all of it?
Well, sir, the traditional means of to get a sleep, so to speak, sleep apnea diagnosis going through an official, polysomnogram. So it's so to speak, a clinic-based study where a person goes in to a sleep center, they get set up for the test, and they're monitored overnight. And after that, the sleep specialist will be able to then make a diagnosis based upon the parameters that comes back after that test. Evolution of the industry and what we here at HireRight offer is actually a home sleep study. So home sleep studies are something that a driver can be set up for. They're FDA approved, and actually the American Academy of Sleep Medicine also approves these devices. To have, it's a simple device that can be hooked up with a chain of custody, which basically assures that the person hooked up is the person tested. And then these people are able to then, sleep where they normally sleep, whether it's in the back of their, truck in their sleeper cab, or if it's at home or in a hotel room. And then interrogation of that data will then allow a board-certified sleep specialist to go through, evaluate it, and then determine if the person has sleep apnea or not.
Good afternoon. I'm Transport Topics reporter Eric Miller. We're going to continue the discussion here on driver wellness, and would like to stay on the topic of sleep apnea with our special guest today, who is Christine Hydock. She is Medical Programs Division Chief for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. She oversees CDL physical qualification standards and related regulatory requirements. Christine, I wanted to start off a little bit with, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Eric. Glad to be here.
I wanted to start off with why the agency is concerned about sleep apnea. Why is it a topic that's a priority?
The agency is focused on the topic. Obviously, we have 13 qualification standards. This is one of those areas that falls under the respiratory qualification standard. And our main mission is safety on the highways, ensuring that everybody's loved ones and family return home safely, and this is one of those medical areas that that falls under our 13 standards.
I know there is not a commitment to do a rulemaking, but you have started the process with an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. I wondered what information you're trying to ascertain from stakeholders regarding sleep apnea.
Thank you. That's a great question. So the agency partnered with the Federal Railroad Administration to put out an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. We published that in March, and it is now currently open for comment. And what we're looking for to obtain in the advance notice of proposed rulemaking is information from the public related to the prevalence of moderate to severe sleep apnea, its potential consequences on safety, and cost and benefit information. So the information that we collect through this advance notice of proposed rulemaking allows the agency to evaluate the topic from several different perspectives. It gives us information that perhaps we're not aware of and allows us to take a very thorough look at the topic in general.
As I'm sure you're aware, some drivers say they have been confused by the standard for sleep apnea. I'm wondering if you could help clarify what a medical examiner looks for when he is evaluating a driver for potential sleep apnea risk.
Sure. So I'd like to highlight first the National Registry of Certified Medical Examiners, which is a registry that the agency has put into place. We currently have 48,000 medical examiners on that registry. Part of becoming a medical examiner is there's thorough training in reference to the regulations themselves, and each of the certified medical examiners on the registry have a clear understanding of the rigors and the scheduling issues that go on with a truck driver. Mm-hmm. So their role in the process is to evaluate the health of the driver as a health screening. They screen medical information to determine whether the individual is qualified and safe to operate the commercial motor vehicle. So as I said, there's 13 qualification standards. 4 of them have specific requirements. That would be vision, diabetes, seizure. I'm missing one. I'm so sorry. Vision, diabetes, seizure.
It might be the topic of a hearing, is it?
It is hearing, thank
yes.
you. And so the respiratory standard, which is where OSA falls into, we rely on, there's 9 other standards, the respiratory one being one of them. We rely on the medical examiner to use medical judgment. Mm-hmm. By doing so, we rely on them to look at best medical practices, standards of care. So there is no prescribed disqualification in this area. Therefore, the medical examiner uses information from the exam to determine whether or not the individual is or is not safe to operate the vehicle.
How does a medical examiner discern between, say, a driver who is sleep deprived versus one who is at risk for sleep apnea?
They would use the screening information, discussions with the individual, the driver, to determine whether more information may be needed to make that determination. And those are situations in which they may require the individual to provide more information. Sleep studies, as we heard in the last segment, in order to diagnose whether that concern exists, whether that person actually is diagnosed with sleep apnea versus is just tired, fatigued.
Some drivers I know have been concerned about the cost of sleep studies. I mean, is there any way that the agency can help defray any of the costs? Or
I think right now the agency is in the stage of the advance notice of proposed rulemaking, and as I stated before, this is our opportunity to gather information to make some of those determinations if the agency chooses to move forward with rulemaking, but to look at that data. So we encourage the public to submit any information related to cost and benefits.
So, some of the trade organizations have have said that the rule should be, any rulemaking, if there is and when there is one, should be concern itself with safety and not driver health. Do you agree with that?
The mission of the agency is safety on the highway. So yes, we support, that is our mission. We want everybody to return home safely. Health is definitely part of the equation, but absolutely, safety on the highway is our #1 mission.
I want to switch topics a little bit here. Can you describe or say how you measure the state of driver health in general? I mean, the industry obviously has a higher obesity rate, more smoking, things like that. I mean, how do you assess the state of driver health in general?
So again, the physical examination is an assessment of the driver's ability to operate safely on the highway. Therefore, the focus of the examination is really on whether those individuals can meet the 13 qualification standards.
Yeah, and the agency has developed a new medical examination form for medical examiners?
There is a new OMB approved, Office of Management and Budget approved form that is not very different from what was used previously. It's now just a prescribed form that captures information on the examination. The National Registry final rule went into effect and the forms were to be used on December 22nd, 2015, and the agency extended that, gave a grace period for those forms to go into effect. So on April 20th, 2016, those forms are now to be used.
What should drivers expect with the new form? Is there anything going to be different? As I understand it, it's designed to encourage the medical examiner to talk about a driver's health history. What should a driver expect?
Well, really the forms are no different than what was used previously. There is a health history section which asks specific questions about the driver's history, medical history. And yes, that section is used to open dialogue with the medical examiner to determine if there are any specific health issues that they should be concerned about and perhaps may need additional information in making the qualification determination.
You know, I'm sort of intrigued by the notion that drivers may not be educated on what they should eat and how they should exercise and such. I mean, do they really not know that, say, for example, it's not good to eat a cheeseburger, you should take another choice? I mean, what is the level of knowledge out there on how to stay healthy with drivers?
You know, I think it's obviously a topic that the more we talk about it, the more educated individuals will become. But I think in the first segment, we discussed a lot about the challenges that truck drivers face in eating healthy. Sometimes it's not necessarily knowing what the right choices are. That's certainly a part of it, but it's also the access to and the time schedule. So this is a great topic to be discussing to determine what are some ways and strategies that drivers could eat healthier and provide education to those individuals.
Do you have any general ideas, any tips for drivers about how to stay healthy? I mean, from your long experience?
I absolutely think some of the tips we talked about previously in the other segment are fantastic. You know, making sure that you're knowledgeable about labels, that you're not eating out of the package, that you're eating, healthy foods that are good for you, and gathering that knowledge.
Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, thank you.
We're going to turn it back to Neil App, and we're going to continue the discussion about driver wellness.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Eric. It was a very informative discussion. Thank you, Christine, for joining us. Maybe not sleep apnea. I want to pick up back on this side of the panel. With sleep, we haven't talked about it yet. What role does sleep play in the overall picture that we've been laying out today?
Well, let me jump in here because now you're getting at the fundamental root of the problem. Drivers are in this industry because they want to make money, okay? In order to make money, especially the long haul drivers, they're driving when the freight dictates. That means sometimes they're driving during the day, sometimes they're driving at night, sometimes they're not driving at all. The problem with this is when their schedule is always changing, it disrupts their circadian rhythms, okay? It disrupts their sleep cycle, okay? In addition to that, most drivers that I work with are not getting 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep, They may get 6 hours of sleep, but there's always a phone call, you've got to pay a lumper, you've got to walk your bills in, you got to put a trailer in a dock door, there's something interrupting that sleep. When you take these two issues, the changing schedule and the interrupted sleep, it creates sleep deprivation. It accumulates every day, every week, every month, every year that you drive. The problem with that is that the hormones that regulate your metabolism are produced in your sleep. So it doesn't take very long, 3 months, 6 months, definitely within the first year of your driving career, your hormones are out of whack, specifically your serum leptin and your serum ghrelin, which regulate metabolism. So to my great surprise, my company, Fitness Trucking, when we studied the problem scientifically in the field, putting on monitors to measure the driver's metabolism every minute of the day, what we realized was, when you think drivers, you think, oh, they're overweight and obese because they're overeating, when in fact they're not. The vast majority of drivers are only eating once or twice a day, and they're skipping meals. And the reason is because of two things. They're not getting the signal that they're hungry and that they need to start eating. Plus, once they've fueled up and they're ready to go and deliver their load, right, they don't want to stop. So they're actually skipping meals, and their metabolism they're not giving their metabolism work to do. So it's slowing down. When they finally do eat, they may overeat at that 1 or 2 particular meal, but their nutrition for the day or for the week, they're actually undernourished. Their body's in starvation mode and their metabolism is slow. So the thing that I have to do with drivers is they don't have control over their sleep schedules. Okay? The freight usually dictates that. So we have to manipulate their metabolism in other ways, and that's what we do, and that's what's worked so well. But the root of the problem, it's not a character issue, it's not a lack of willpower issue, it's not a personality issue. At the root of it, it's a hormonal change related to sleep.
Would you agree with that in dealing with also talking to younger drivers
I agree
too?
with some of the stuff he says, but it boils down to the discipline of the driver, making sure he gets that rest. And it also based on what the company, if the company's pushing the guy to do this, it shouldn't be done. The company should supply the time for this guy to take a break. If he's got 10 hours, he needs to take that 10 hours. But if he's being pressured to do this, and that's a big problem. You pressure a guy, and he's thinking about his load. He's thinking about where he's going to be, and that's one of the basic problems with some of the companies out there. They have to allow the guy to have his rest. Same thing with exercise. You got these guys going down the road all the time. You got to have, we have the 30-minute break, which is a great thing that they did. You got 30 minutes to do if you have to exercise or get a meal or whatever you got to do. But the main thing is trying to get a little bit of exercise in that time span. But the main thing is, you see this time and time again, some of these companies will put the pressure on the guy. And that's a big factor. So you want to make sure that person is getting the proper rest. And you can get it. You can get that rest. I'll sleep for maybe 6-7 hours, and I got another 3 hours that I can relax, have a meal, prepare myself, and go out there. Sometimes during the day, you might have got the full rest that you think you had, but you didn't get it, like he was talking about, and the guy might be tired. I'm going to pull over. As a professional driver, I'm going to pull over and take that time off because I'm the one that's behind the wheel, and I'm responsible for that load. Now, my company's good enough to, if they see me on the side of the road, if I took a little more time, that's okay. We want to make sure that you're safe, and that's what's good about my company. And some of these company owners need to realize that, we wouldn't have this problem with sleep apnea and everything else if we'd had companies that would allow the driver to get that time and rest and not discipline him because he took an extra 2 hours. So if I take some extra time, my company says, well, why'd you take some time? I had to pull over, and it's not often. Every once in a while it catches up to you. And when it catches up to you, the driver's smart enough, and he's a professional, to know, I got to get over and pull on the side of the road. And I think that's the main thing as far as keeping drivers from falling asleep.
Neil, there's one other really important point when it comes to sleep apnea, which is I work with Heather Monkoff of Cardinal Health. She runs the on-site sleep lab at Prime. She has a certification. There's only 200 people in the country that have this certification. She's an expert when it comes to sleep issues and drivers. And what she told me was that the drivers diagnosed with sleep apnea, about 80% of the cases, it's because of obesity. It's not because they have actual physical obstructions in the neck or some other factors. So if you want to prevent sleep apnea, or you want to treat or cure sleep apnea, and you want to make safer highways, the key to it is obesity prevention. So if you have healthy drivers that are coming into the industry, they need a program like what we have at Prime that will show them how to prevent the weight gain. And if you have drivers that are already obese and have this condition, you need a program where they can lose the weight. And what Cardinal Health has done at Prime is when they test a driver, if they're in the mild obstructive category, right, where basically what Heather has told me is that if they were to lose 20 or 30 pounds and retest, then they wouldn't have sleep apnea, they wouldn't have to go on the machine. So companies need to, it's not enough to just have a testing and regulating. If you have these drivers, what do you do with them? You got to have a program that if they follow it, it's a great chance they're going to lose 20 or 30 pounds. And when they do that, that's
it's a
the
life
key.
changer.
Life changer.
And I think that's the main thing is a lot of drivers, all my life I've done, exercise, and I have a little bit of knowledge, some knowledge. There's a lot of drivers that don't know that. They've never really gone to a gym, they've never really had been on a program, but the information, like what his company is doing is great. If you have that information in front of you, they follow up on the guy, they don't just leave him out there. If you follow up on the guy and give him something to look at and something to follow, it's a lot easier. And some of the stuff we were talking about, he had 15 minutes. All you have to do is do this program for 15 minutes, and it takes care of that day.
So there's a reason why we have you two here. It's not just by accident we plucked you out of thin air and hope it worked out. I mean, I'm sitting here with two national champions. So let's talk about this for a minute so people can understand. These two guys have an idea of what works, and clearly based on your background. Now, you're a national champion power lifter, right? That's one thing you do. You might not. What is that, and how do you squeeze that in terms of what you do on your daily basis?
Well, I used to do a lot of play basketball, cardiovascular. And I started slowing down. It was kind of funny. My wife saw me playing the basketball game. She goes, "Man, you're really slow." So I realized I can't really do that anymore. So I got into strength training, and it was really great because I'm getting gray-haired and getting older, and I didn't want to be that person that was a couch potato and just lost his strength and his vitality. And that was just an outlet for me, just another different outlet. Mm-hmm. And I just love it. I've been doing it for 14 years. And
what you've won a couple pretty high awards.
Nassau that I belong to, it's a natural athlete, so there's nobody juicing or anybody taking drugs.
Great.
That's what I liked about it. So it's another thing that I always liked competition, so that was one of the things I got.
And you won the Mike Russell Trucking Image Award. I'm just going through. You guys, obviously, road team, New Mexico Grand Champion of the Truck Driving Championships. You've finished several top 3 finishes at the national level of truck driving. White House Champion of Change Transportation Award. You've been around the block. Let's talk about the health. You mentioned the Healthy Fleet Challenge is something you mentioned with the Fitbit technology. That's something you do both within the fleet, and it's a wider challenge. You could briefly share.
Nationwide thing, which
that any fleet really could look into that. You could just talk briefly about that.
And you just get a Fitbit. What this did was I've always walked and I've always ran, and this just stepped it up a notch. And like the days that I didn't get a chance to do something, I would look at on my app and it'd tell me exactly how many steps I did that day, and I could tell, well, I got to get moving. So instead of just sitting down and watching TV or sitting at the motel, I would get out and walk. Just like drivers, instead of just going to the sleeper and watching TV, they can go out and do some steps. So it was like a motivator, and it kept track of what I needed to do.
And I know your company, ArcBest, it's a unit, ABF Freight unit of ArcBest. They've been recognized locally in Fort Smith, Arkansas. They've been recognized nationally, and more than just on a trucking level. A number of different awards, dropping some healthcare costs, getting engagement, not both drivers, office workers. I mean, there's plenty of information out there on the company as well.
And that's the big thing. If you got a company that supports you, it just makes it that much easier to do.
So let's go down. We have another champion. This is someone went to Yale, a swimmer, almost made the Olympics. We're talking last night, missed it by less than a second, and it was sort of a life-changing, sort of reflection moment for you, Zapiwe. You went off for a while, did some traveling, found yourself, went into trucking. You could bring us up to speed in terms of how you got to sitting in that chair today, which we appreciate.
So, I'd be driving, and I would drive past, the mountains in Utah, and I'd like, man, I'd love to go mountain bike riding, or, I'd be in California, and I'm like, man, I'd love to go surfing, or, I'd drive by state parks, and I wish I had the opportunity to get out of my truck and go do those kind of things. And as I was developing this 13-week program and these fitness strategies and the way to stay in shape, and I was starting to get in shape, on a whim, I wonder, how fast I would be if I was swimming again. So just kind of on a whim, I entered what's called a master's swimming competition. And this is while I was still driving. I was a long haul driver. I was driving 330 days a year, on the road. And I went and did this swimming competition, and I did really well, and realized there was a national championships for masters swimming. And I decided I was going to go compete, and I was able to call my fleet manager and get a load out to Mesa, Arizona, and go to the national championships. And I'm thinking I'm going to go and see some old buddies, and if I'm lucky, I might make the top 10. Turns out I won 2 events. I become a national champion, and I started getting a lot of media attention. Who is this strange guy who drives this truck into the parking lot of the National Swimming Championships and then wins 2 events, and then gets in his truck and picks up a load, right? And so as a result of that sort of notoriety, there were media attention, and I was called the fittest truck driver in America, and then implemented this 13-week program at Prime, which ended up earning them the Healthiest Company Award at the 2014 CES Digital Health Summit. These are companies like Google and Sony and all these, all the companies making digital health devices, and in that sphere, you'd think they would have win an award like this.
You might not think Trucking and Fitness and the CES show, which is a great technology show in Las Vegas, but you see, this is where trucking's moving to, and health fits into this, about how technology can sort of bring this all
You'd never
together.
think a trucking company would win a Healthiest Company Award, but that's a testament to what Robert has done at Prime.
And that's Robert Lowe.
Robert Lowe, yes. And so that media attention gave me the opportunity to really talk about the scientific finding and understanding that I was able to generate working with drivers and using a lot of digital health equipment, and realizing that we didn't really understand the issue, right? If we use what I call the old science, the whole calories in, calories out, that's not the issue with drivers. In fact, the first 50 drivers went through my program, they all had a calorie deficit. Okay, they were burning way more calories than they were consuming. That wasn't the issue. And I was able to use digital health technology to actually find out what was the real metabolic issue, and a lot of data, and I was able to talk about it. So at this point now, I'm Men's Health Magazine and Sports Illustrated and Fox Sports.
So let me jump in. So speaking of Fox Sports, so just earlier this month here, not long ago, They did a documentary called Changing Lanes.
Yes.
Right? So it was the Outstanding Short Feature category.
Yes.
Sports Emmy. It's about 8 minutes or so. Really a worthwhile read. After our program today, we're going to put the URL up, but stick with us here. But I would encourage everyone, both from a fitness standpoint, from a health standpoint, I would even make the case from a trucking image standpoint, which we can do a whole other show on. It is a worthwhile, not only to watch it yourself, but get that message out there. It's a really, really interesting story, and I think a nice counterpoint to what is a career 3.5 million mile driver with those tips, along with someone that we talked about less than 1 second from its 92 Olympics.
92 Olympic trials.
That you wouldn't be sitting here, trucking might be completely out there, and that you've spent a number of years trying to figure out how that 1 second slipped away. And I think to your, as you sort of put, that your benefit, and hopefully to the benefit of not only Prime, but you've taken this with your fitness trucking to a much wider audience. I think something that a lot of the industry can take away from. I want to go to a question we received not too long ago, Sergio Rojas, bringing up about this 4 minutes, some of these health, reacting to the health. Just going to rattle off a couple things here. Is that continuous, 20-second on, 10-second off interval? We might, in an extra, do a 4-minute workout if time allows later on. So look for it on the replay. If we can convince one or both of them to hang with us, we'll see that. What about injury risk? The drivers have been sedentary for so long. Maybe we talked a little before the show about stretching. That might be something you want to talk about. And other safe exercises you might want to recommend. So some reaction from what we've been talking about, particularly about exercise, maybe you both comment about.
As far as like the injuries, I think the most common thing in my workplace is back injuries. And a lot of times the guys are sitting there for long periods of time and they develop muscle atrophy in the lower back. and they get the lumbar pulls, they get the back spinal injuries. A lot of times I always recommend that the drivers do a lot of hamstring exercises, because I've been driving for 37 years and I'll sit for long periods of time, but yet I can still lift 550 pounds. And they said, how do you do that? It's because I have strong hamstrings. So the stretching part and the areas that you have to work on to keep that back from slipping out is one of the big things. Stretching is a big thing. I mean, you can burn calories stretching. And just
stretching, both calorie and injury prevention.
Exactly. And I've always said that stretching is a pain reliever. Natural pain reliever that you can do if you have those ailments.
And stretching, I know, is big in terms of your message. And if you can speak a little bit more about this 4 minutes.
Yeah, getting back to the gentleman's question. So 4 minutes is sort of what I use for a slogan. 4 minutes continuous is great. If you can't do 4 minutes, right? The key is it's any movement you can do at maximum intensity. So if you're doing a movement you can do, you're already lowering the risk of injury because it's something you're comfortable doing. It's not something you can't do or is new to you. If you can only do 30 seconds, that's where you start. You do 30 seconds all out. You know if you're doing it right if you're breathing so hard that you can barely finish the sentence. And that first week, you might only be able to do 30 seconds. Then the next week, you're doing 40 seconds, and you can build your way up. Now, if you're doing sort of 20 seconds on, 10 seconds rest, which is a traditional Tabata workout, that'll work just as well. But you want to set aside 4 minutes. The science shows that that's what it takes to turn your metabolism on to its highest level. And that's the purpose of exercising now in this trucking environment. It's not the extra calories. You could walk 1,000,000 steps and never have an effect on your metabolism. So I have a lot of drivers, they're saying, how do I get started? I haven't been exercising. They're afraid to use intensity because conventional wisdom is, okay, start slow, start moderate, and build. No, most of the science out there will show you, even if you haven't been exercising, even if you're obese, if you do short, high-intensity stuff, very short, 4 minutes or less, right, you will burn 9 times as much fat, right, as if you do moderate type activity. So if you're a driver and you've got limited time, right, you could walk 30 minutes in the parking lot, or you could do 2 minutes of high intensity, any movement you can do, maximum effort, and you're going to burn the same amount of fat. Me, I'm not taking the 30 minutes. I'm taking the 2 minutes.
So, and you're doing a mix, from what I understand, a mix of some walking, some of the lifting, some of the stretching, along with packing some of the snacks. You sort of have a little bit of a routine and sort of your LTL route. Am I understanding that correctly?
But it's true what he said, because you know what, we call that compound lifting, and it gets your heart rate up at a certain speed. So sometimes I'll do heavy lifting some days, and then I'll do the compound lifting, which is you actually get your heart rate and you burn more calories. But I've never heard the 4 minute. That's pretty interesting. But we usually do it for 30 minutes, when I'm at the gym. But like he said, if there's, you're out there on the highway and, you pull over to the truck stop or you have some place to park, that's an ideal thing to do because you're getting your heart rate up, and you want to do that every day. You want to get your heart rate up to a certain level, and that brings your blood pressure down. But what I used to use, when I didn't have time, I have these rubber bands that I use that you can buy at Walmart, and I'll just do some curls. I'll put the bands on the side of the truck, and I'll do some triceps and just move around, just jog in place, for 40 seconds.
It sounds like one thing is anything for a starting point. Anything.
Get it in where you can fit it in is the key.
You can do it in 10 minutes or 4 minutes, whatever you want to do. It just depends on what you're doing.
And that's the key, is we have to change the mindset in the industry. If the mindset is, it's so hard to do, and if you hear the word exercise, you're thinking gym, 30 minutes, 60 minutes.
Ugh.
Right? Then what happens when you have 20 minutes available to you, but in your mind you're thinking you need 40 or 60 minutes to get results? What'll happen? You'll say, I don't have time, and you won't do it. If we can get it across to the drivers that you can get great results in 15 minutes or less, or building it into your routine. If you're getting out of your truck to fuel, or walking in and out of the shipper or receiver, and you're going back to your truck, aren't you already outside your truck? Did you have to go out of your way to do it? Right there on the side of your truck, do your 4 minutes, and then you're done, right? And it's convenient. You don't have to think about it. It's built into your routine. That's the key for these guys who want to get started, is realizing it's not this great gargantuan mammoth task.
Let's go a couple other questions. One, female-focused tips. I know some of this applies to everyone, right? Eating and exercise. That want to know if there's anything. We've done programs before to try and focus on female truck drivers in particular. If there's anything you could share that might specifically be tailored a little bit more to some of the some things that may help them.
I just talked to a female driver that's America's Road Team, Stephanie Lang, and I was asking her the same thing. You know, it's sometimes you gotta at the truck stops. There's mostly primarily men, and what she does, and she does a lot of just like simple things. She'll park away as far as she can from the main entrance and walks, and she'll walk back. And she said it's not really, like you said, it's not really going to the gym. She just tries to do everything that she can. She told me that one of her favorite exercises is she lowers the landing gear and she raises the landing gear. And
so doing her job is also making sure to sort of get.
She'll do it if she has some extra time.
A little extra to work.
And it actually moves everything: her lats, her triceps, her biceps. You just have to be, you just have to do something that you can do right there sometimes, and just figure out what you can do. She told me she hangs onto the side of the tank and she does squats, holds onto the tank and does that for 20 seconds.
And you must also work with the female drivers as well.
Yeah, for a lot of the women, they definitely safety concerns are much more of a factor, and so some of the things that I've used to work with, it works with the women. One, I let them know, hey, you're already getting out of your truck to dolly down the landing gear or opening the trailer doors, and so you'll get out of your truck and you'll do something for your job. You should be willing to do that for your health, which is more important for your job, especially if it's only 4 minutes, something short as that. If you're worried about someone maybe looking at you and laughing and mocking you, that may be the case. Maybe there's somebody there that is, but you don't know. You're speculating. And let's say they are. Okay, well, who are they that they're so important? You don't know their name. You're never going to talk to them. Who are they that they would stop you from doing what you need to do to take care of your health? And while you're doing that, for every person that might be thinking that, there's another person that you might be inspiring. They're looking at you and they're saying, I should be doing that as well. Now, the other tips that I give women is, if you can stand in your truck, as long as you can stand up, I can show you what to do so you can get your vigorous activity inside your truck, or you can do it in the shower room, the TA, where it's private. So I'll give them these tips. But the most important thing is this mindset, which is the prerequisite for doing your job and taking care of your family is your health. Those are the prerequisites for both of them. So you have to put yourself first. You have to find a solution that does work for you. And as long as you're committed to that, you'll find a way to get it done.
I've heard it sort of phrased, well, everyone talks about preventive maintenance of their truck, pre-trip inspection, do that, and no one, bats an eye. Okay, it may take a few minutes and all, but, it's an accepted part of whether you're a technician, a driver, whatever it is. But somehow that hasn't trickled down to your own self and trickling to your family.
It's funny what he said about the guys making fun of you. Now those guys are asking me questions.
And so there's a perception at first, maybe if you walk around your truck. I know is one thing I've heard many times. Paul Will mentioned it also, and that's one. And maybe some people are looking at you a couple of times. The first few times they're looking at you like, what's this guy up to? And then they're coming up and saying, no, tell me what you're doing. Is that what's happening? A couple other quick questions. We need to start to wrap up. But a few, Lori Jordan, so much conflicting, and we've gotten this a number of times, so I'm glad that it came in again. There's so much conflicting info available on the web, and we talked about some of the food and this study, that study. Where is a good place to obtain and download clear, concise, printable information about everything we've been talking about?
About food?
About everything, about health, wellness, food, exercise, any suggestions where either that you particularly like or maybe you want to mention where you feel people may want to go to get an inkling.
Well, Healthy Fleet has been great for me with his Fitbit.
Yep.
They're always putting out different things that you can do. You can go to their website and get some information on where to eat sometimes, and if you're have to stop at a restaurant, fast food, the suggestions that they give. So there's many apps that they have now, but the one I go to particularly is Healthy Fleet because they kind of monitor what I'm doing with this Fitbit,
And these are very affordable. People are not familiar. They come in all shapes and sizes. I have one that isn't on the wrist. I carry in my pocket, although sometimes I end up thinking I lost it. It's deep in the pocket. But between it can count some sleep, steps, both how many steps you're taking, stairs. It can give you some inkling. And it can be a real self-motivator.
Yeah, it is.
You have a program with your own company and with others. But even within yourself to say, oh, I need to get moving. That's what I find.
And
it's amazing.
What's great about this is that there's guys all over the country. We have the road team. We have business executives, company owners, and we're constantly, harassing each other kind of and motivating each other. What happened to you today? I'm passing you, and it kind of motivates you. I got to stay ahead of this guy. So it's kind of a group thing that really motivates you.
And where would you direct people to get
Well, I
this
would
clear,
say
concise
there's
info?
very little great information on nutrition and fitness specifically geared to truck drivers. So, I would say go to my website, fitnesstrucking.com. Okay, that's where I post a lot of my research that I'm doing that's trucker specific. Or you can go to my other website, which is www.sipiwebaleka.com. I also am the driver health editor for Road King magazine. So if you stop at a TA, you pick up that magazine. I write articles on driver health, and you can get information there. But really, if it's something really specific and important, go to my website and send me an email. And I'll answer your specific question and give you the best answer that I can. And next year, my book is coming out, and it's all these things that we've learned that work for truck drivers. So you'll be able to get the book, and that should answer everything. And I'm really excited about that.
I got two more. We have to wrap up. I got two more. Let's do a little quick speed round. One came in about bicycle, and I know we've talked about you do bike riding in particular, even in the cab. Mm-hmm. Someone was asking that the company has prevented them from using the bike because of possible load securement violations and related to CSA. Let's not get into that, but you use sometimes the folding bike, training bike. If you could give a tip, someone specifically asking about wanting to use a bicycle and having some problems with
Best solution for truck drivers, right? There's a company called Montague. They make a bike, it's called the Paratrooper. It was originally made for the military, for people jumping out of planes into fields, and they needed to be able to strap a bike onto their back, land in the field, open up the bike, and ride out. So I used this bike for 3 years when I was driving. It's great. It folds up in a bag. It fits in your sleeper. The great thing about it is it has a weight rating of, I think, 400 pounds. You get any other cheap bicycle, right? You're going to ride it for 2-3 months, and then you're going to break a pedal, you're going to break a seat stem, you're going to hit a pothole, and the forks are going to bend because they're not made for truck drivers that are heavy. This bike, you fold up, put it in the sleeper. You don't have to worry about jerry-rigging it to the truck, right? And you'll be able to use it for years. That's my solution.
And I got an email that went out at Bison Transport. They were offering, send out talking about some folding bikes. That there are some might be better than others. I'm not here to sort of review the folding bike. So it might be a matter of they were trying to keep it outside, so it might not be the typical bike you'd have in your home garage. But there are opportunities for people. They asked about that. Last one, and maybe provide you an opportunity to wrap up any last points. What is the friendliest way to enforce or suggest to our drivers the importance of improving a healthy lifestyle without insulting them? So what's the friendliest way, or I guess I would also add to that, what about those ones that you just can't seem to get motivated? What do you do? Now, maybe that from a fleet perspective, what would you tell them as we wrap up?
I think nowadays the drivers are seeing, you see guys, dying off. I just had a friend that just died. He was only 62 years old. Mm-hmm. And he had all the symptoms, overweight, and I always used to try to get him to walk with me. Just say, let's just go walk. You're going to be here for a while. I think the main thing is letting the guys know that they can do certain things that's in their realm that they can exercise. But the main thing is you want to feel good. I want to be around when I retire. I want to spend time with my grandkids. Just that alone is the biggest motivator. I'll tell those guys, hey, you want to be around. Mm-hmm. You're getting ready to retire next year. That guy retired for 1 year, and he was gone. And that's sad. It's really sad, and it's because he didn't take care of himself. So that should be a gentle way. Well, I guess it's not gentle. You're going to die, but it's something.
For some people, it's the unfortunate reality of the situation. This epidemic, as
you're dealing with guys. You're going to tell them something like that to get them motivated. And all I can say to you guys is just get out there, move. You want to feel good.
Well, you said the word friend, right? So when I think of a friend, it's somebody that I care about. And so I'm going to tell them the truth the best way I know how to. As long as it's sincere, right, and you tell them the truth and say, hey, we've got to face this, right? You can make it personal. You can talk about what's important to you, right? Whether it's your grandkids or your spouse or your business or whatever it is that's in your hobbies, whatever it is that's important to you, right? Health is something that's with you every single moment of every single day of your life. And ultimately, you're the one responsible for it. And you're in the most unhealthy occupation in America. Highest rate of obesity, highest rate of metabolic syndrome, lowest life expectancy, and in 2012, the highest number of fatalities. If you aren't doing something specific to counter that, you are going to be its victim. So let's talk about what we can do. And to Robert's credit, every Friday morning in our company meeting that's open to the entire company and staff, whether you're a driver, in-house associate, sales exec, work in the tire bay, everyone's invited to this meeting. And he gets up there and he talks from his heart. And every person in each department and we have to stand up and be accountable. So it just has to be sincere.
Okay. Well, I want to thank both of you. I also want to mention that we had another interview from Wellness Coaches USA. They're a consulting firm, does a lot with trucking transportation. And I spoke with them, and they shared a lot of tips about how to engage drivers, the way to do it in a friendly manner, in a coaching, in a one-on-one, in a voluntary method. They addressed return on investment. They addressed some of the health tips that apply both to trucking. They've worked a number of years directly with trucking and transportation companies. They also widened the conversation about some of the similarities about jobs in general. So I'm sorry we didn't get to that today. The full interview of all of the Skypes will be up shortly on our website. I would encourage you, if you're interested in this conversation, if you feel it's as valuable as we do here at Transport Topics, encourage you to take a few extra minutes to watch all of those, particularly the wellness coaches. So, okay, I want to remind everyone a full replay of this program will be available later today on our website, ttnews.com, also LiveOnWeb.ttnews.com. And as I said, you'll find the complete interviews with Paul Will, Dr. Todd Simo, Gene McGuire, and Austin Zerline of Wellness Coaches USA. Thanks to all of them for taking part. And again, Ralph Sapiwe,
Good to be here.
and also Christine, who had to leave. Thank you, everyone, for taking part in this. Also, a replay will be available as a podcast download on iTunes. Very simple. Search LiveOnWeb, Transport Topics, you're going to find it. Also, we'd like to hear from you about our broadcast today. You can do that on LinkedIn at ttn.ws/LOW is linked. LOW, LiveOnWeb, is linked. We're going to be off next month, but LiveOnWeb will return in July for our third annual look at the TT Top 100 for Hire publication. Until next time, I'm Neil Apt. On behalf of Eric Miller and the entire LiveOnWeb crew, thank you for watching.